Yukito Urabe, an average Japanese boy, gets thrown into the sea by his cult leader father. The dying Yukito curses the gods for his cruel fate and wishes for a world without them. When his wish gets granted, Yukito is reborn into a painless village life in a medieval world. However, the country's cruel emperor, who has a god complex, orders the killing of Yukito's village friends. Helpless against the emperor's army, Yukito discovers that there is still a god willing to help him. In the waters of a raging sea, an army of strong men chant prayers to a mysterious being while carrying a reluctant young boy. Bound inside a barrel, the reluctant boy, Yukito Urabe, wonders where his life went wrong as his dad announces to sacrifice him. Even though Yukito doesn't want to be aborted as an adult, his father, a cult leader, has complete faith that sleeping inside the sea for 3 days will make his son the new leader through the power of his god, Mitama. After saying his final goodbye to Yukito, his father gives him a strange pendant and promises that Mitama will protect him before tossing him into the sea. While sinking to his doom, Yukito's life flashes before his eyes, and he realizes that his life never really went wrong after a certain point. It had always been garbage. Recalling how he'd get embarrassed in high school, beaten by his insane father, remembering that his terrible life made him toy with his meat flute with dead, empty eyes, Yukito finally prays to a god he doesn't believe in. He hopes to be reborn in a world where there won't be any cruel gods or strange religions, so he never has to suffer again. After this final wish, Yukito's vision goes black. As he remains unconscious, a nearby woman tries to wake him up in the most effective way to wake up a man. She grabs his lever and starts flicking it up and down to turn him on, which is Yukito's first memory after waking up in this new world. As the girl realizes Yukito has finally woken up, she suddenly gets embarrassed about her actions and apologizes for fulfilling one of his fantasies. Luckily for Allura, there aren't any police around to arrest her anyway. After the girl introduces herself, Yukito forgives her before he looks around at her village, realizing it's a scene like in the RPG Isekai anime. He thinks he can now go on an adventure in this RPG world. However, Allura has no idea what he's talking about, not knowing what magic, guilds, and adventures mean. This surprises Yukito, but the girl does offer him a job in her village. Excited, Yukito heads out to perform the job, thinking it'll be a cool mission. However, he gets disappointed upon seeing it's just a farm. As he prepares to work, though, a weirdo named Roy starts harassing him for talking to Allura. However, a man named Clint quickly calms Roy down and gives Yukito a dagger for a task. Yukito gets excited, thinking he's got a weapon to hunt monsters, but it's just to harvest a bunch of fruit. In his mind, Yukito keeps himself deluded by thinking it's just a tutorial quest. But when he later ends up getting too much fruit to store, Yukito turns it into wine for the village. And just like that, a month passes with Yukito working as a farmer. While living in a restaurant run by Allura and her big sister, Siluril, he wonders why he was unlucky enough to be reborn in a completely normal world. To forget about all his pains, Yukito joins the rest of the drunken people in the bar and gets drunk enough to forget his own name. A few days later, Yukito learns that this new world isn't completely normal. While working on the farm as usual, he hears a man shouting to run away. Roy, who is with him, tells Yukito that the man must have encountered a strange beast. Yukito seems confused, but when a massive, poorly designed buffalo-rhino hybrid comes charging out of the forest, he almost turns his gray pants brown. Thankfully, Roy takes out a book to deal with the beast, looking like he'll cast some spells. However, he can only come up with one strategy: running. Even though this is a normal human reaction to a massive beast, Yukito can't help but feel disappointed that there's no magic or powers to fight them. After avoiding the beast, Yukito later returns home, drinking his worries away in the tavern. He feels like this peaceful life isn't so bad after all, even if he isn't an Ultra Sigma Chad with godly powers and a harem of brainless girls by his side. Seeing everyone so cheerful, Allura thanks Yukito for helping their village out. He smiles, feeling like God did him a favor by sending him to this world. However, Yukito discovers that Allura has no idea what God means. Later, while thinking about this godless world, he walks in a forest. There, his thoughts are interrupted by a dead creature. Picking it up, Yukito wonders if the people here with no spirituality even have the concept of burial. Suddenly, a worried Roy and Allura appear behind him, thinking he hunted the creature down. Then, Roy whispers into Yukito's ears about a forbidden manual. Yukito gets excited thinking it might have forbidden magic knowledge, but it just turns out to be a book about the sacred act of sex. Yukito, who has been to the far of Reddit and cultured websites, does not react to this information, surprising both of them. Later, they take Yukito to the imperial capital to find a black market shop selling said books. Yukito looks at the books and wonders why educational biology books are forbidden in this country, and both the simple Allura and Roy are shocked by his shamelessness. On their way back, though, the group encounters a strange scene. A bunch of random people are forced to take their own lives in public. and Yukito learns from a sad Earl that it's a custom for the people to see heaven early if the emperor orders it. Apparently, this world may not have religion, but it certainly has cults. Yukito also learns that people from Alural's village are treated horribly in the capital, getting special treatment for some reason. Later, after reaching home, Yukito goes to sleep. At night, Alural sneaks into his bed, which wakes him up. Somehow, he can resist the urge to take advantage of her and instead asks what she's trying to do. Apparently, Alural has learned from the Aro book that tying a man up really helps with his energy levels. Of course, the poor guy refuses her experiments before Alural begins discussing something serious with him. She reveals that her village is actually an isolation camp, where people who are considered defective or afraid of ending their own lives are sent to live. She feels happy that Yukito is a close enough friend to share this information with, before noticing his pretty pendant. Yukito, who thinks it's a useless trinket, hands it to her before she leaves. Somewhere else in the tavern, we see an upset Siluril, hoping she could have saved someone in particular. The next day, Yukito is alerted to some noise. He rushes out to see a beaten Roy and learns that from their village, people are not asked to take their own lives, but are forced to do it as a bunch of trash. His eyes widened upon learning it was Alural and Siluril's turn, and a carriage with Clen on it gives Yukito hope of reaching and saving them. Meanwhile, in the Imperial capital, a sad Alural looks at her already gone sister. As it's her turn next, Yukito finally makes it and notices all the innocent people dead. He tries to fight off the guards to save Alural, but the captain of the knights, Bertrand, easily takes Yukito out. As he lies there releasing a lot of strange ketchup from his body, Alural screams to help him but also gets introduced to heaven. Crawling on his last breath, Yukito approaches Alural's body and grabs her pendant. Thinking about how his god Mitama was supposed to save him, Yukito finally prays to this supposed deity. Finally, the pendant glows and lo, behold, a mighty, Loli, yes, Loli is summoned. The girl holds Yukito, happy to have finally been summoned before noticing he has been Ice Guy without Truck Kun. Seeing the knights around her responsible for his death, the girl gets enraged and erases all of them with her godly powers. Then, she revives all of the people Yukito came for. Alural wakes up, disoriented, while Mitama happily plays with Yukito. He wonders who this divine Loli is, before learning it is indeed his one and only god, Mitama. Siluril also wakes up, surprised to still be alive, seeing his pet god Mitama powerful enough to revive the dead. Yukito starts getting all sorts of intrusive thoughts. However, before returning home, he notices that the people around them watching the show do not react and quietly leave after the knights are erased. Later, the villagers are pleasantly surprised to see everyone alive and immediately call for a massive party. While drinking, Yukito feels happy to have survived but also realizes the entire imperial capital is now mad at him. Thankfully, he feels at ease knowing he has an obedient child that'll do anything for him. Meanwhile, Alural tries getting Mitama into a proper dress before asking about her relationship with Yukito. The word God just does not register to her, and when Mitama tells her she'll be with Yukito for life, Alural immediately dies inside for multiple reasons. Trying not to think of Yukito as a lolican, Alural hopes that he just likes little girls to protect them, while Siluril explains to Mitama that she's just jealous since she's in love with him. This news makes Mitama happy, who pats Alural's head for being friends with her child, and Siluril realizes how ridiculous she looks acting so mature with her size. Later, when Yukito discovers from Clen that the end-of-life ceremony has been around for hundreds of years, Mitama slams into him. As she happily plays with him, everyone around them wonders who she is, and Yukito makes a dumb excuse for her. Nearby, Roy, who is watching the cute girl, becomes 10 times more disgusting than he already is, and proposes his love to her. Of course, Mitama rejects him like the trash he is, which somehow awakens his inner M, and disgusts the entire village by his creepiness. As Siluril and Alural play the shoot the fruit off of Roy's head with a knife game, Yukito asks Mitama what her godly powers are capable. After learning she can even take out an entire country by herself, he grins, growing smug because of his new companion. The excited Mitama suddenly tries showing off this power to a horrified Yukito, but it somehow does nothing. It turns out that gods need followers to believe in them to have their godly powers, and Mitama lost all her powers in this new godless world. Now, just as Yukito realizes she's about as useful as Roy himself, a villager alerts everyone that the imperial capital is now hunting for them. Fortunately, the villagers trust their miraculous savior Yukito, who is ready to pee out an entire pool by now. He heads out to avoid the drunken villagers and goes to take a bath to relax. Inside, he shivers with fear, wondering what to do when he notices Mitama with him. Getting embarrassed, he tosses Mitama around, wondering why she follows him everywhere. Upon learning that Yukito is scared the village will get attacked, Mitama suggests running away, which he immediately refuses, as Yukito says he doesn't want the villagers to get hurt because of him running away. Mitama comforts him, saying he has always bravely faced many misfortunes in his life. However, Yukito is not satisfied and wants to stop being a useless coward. He asks Mitama if getting new followers will restore her powers, and decides to create a new religion just like his father did to restore her to her peak. To begin, they use the submissive Roy, who fantasizes about becoming Mitama's pet, to become her first follower. Then, Yukito decides to start preaching his religion to the people of the village. But Mitama feels confident that she can make them believe in her using her own words. Thus, they start preaching, but all the stupid Mitama can say is "Worship me, I'm God," with no proof other than the fact that she even knows where Mitama's butt-cheek dimple is, before Mitama can straight up leak Yukito's browsing history. He stops her from performing her only miracle. Then, to convince the villagers, he tells her that Mitama is an all-knowing, all-powerful being who can read everyone's minds. To begin, he claims that Mitama knows all about Allural's love troubles, which makes her blush. The villagers are shocked that Allural does indeed have problems with romance before a smug Mitama starts leaking more of her secret. Apparently, Allural does not like how big her biological pillows are, and a cheeky Mitama tells her that Yukito actually prefers them small, having her entire world turned upside down. Allural gets an axe to chop her extra parts off before Yukito stops her. Unfortunately, nothing he says can convince her since Allural thinks Mitama has peeked into the depths of his heart to reveal his preference. However, this drama doesn't really gain Mitama any real followers, and Yukito later feels helpless about using this weak god to get believers. Despite hating his father for his selfish actions, Yukito is forced to admit that the man was clever enough to have grown a major religion by himself. Suddenly, barges in with Allural's pet, Chilchil. The little monster seems to have eaten something poisonous, and this cruel country has no animal doctors. Thus, Allural can only hope for Mitama to save it with her divine powers. Yukito later makes medicine from some herbs to heal Chilchil, and Mitama notices how much he's willing to help others now. Unfortunately, the little monster cannot take it and passes away before everyone's sad eyes. Seeing everyone upset, Mitama sighs before reviving Chilchil with the power she gained from having Roy as a follower. After Mitama collapses from using up all her energy, Chilchil jumps into Allural's arms. Suddenly, Mitama gains all her strength back and feels even more powerful, realizing Silral and Allural are also her followers now. Yukito realizes that witnessing a divine miracle must have given the two sisters great faith, and increased Mitama's power drastically even with only 2 followers. Then, Allural requests her to revive the knights she took out with her new powers. Even though Yukito feels like it's risky, Allural feels bad about mere soldiers dying for no reason. Mitama revives them all, but this time, something goes wrong. Or right for all you cultured men out there. The captain of the knights, Bertrand, gets revived, but Mitama's powers being wonky has turned him into a very embarrassed and nude girl now. Somewhere else, we see a strange woman kill a dangerous beast with a powerful attack. Through an advanced gadget, a voice congratulates this girl, called Adder, for completing her job. Meanwhile, back at the Imperial City, Bertrand tries returning to her quarters, but a guard immediately rejects her. Unfortunately, her new body makes her unrecognizable, and Bertrand later has to spend her night in a forest. To pile onto her misery, Roy suddenly appears, very interested in getting to know her more personally. The loyal knight cannot even attack someone without the Emperor's orders, so she is completely helpless. Thankfully, Yukito has some chivalry and saves her from the disgusting freak. Bertrand gets angry at Yukito since she blames him for turning her into a girl and getting her kicked out. However, she feels like repaying him for saving her life, so she reluctantly agrees to stay in his village. Inside, Yukito laughs evilly, having easily fooled this innocent, trusting knight. The next day, while farming, a village encounters another strange beast. To defeat it, Mitama summons an ancient weapon, which is so ancient it's covered with rust. She is shocked that the weapon rotted away in the sea before Bertrand unexpectedly appears to save the day. With her sword, she releases a strong attack that slices the beast in 2 in front of the shocked villagers. Taking this opportunity, Yukito recovers from his shock and claims that Bertrand is actually Mitama's holy knight and will protect everyone if they believe in her. As the people wonder who Mitama is, Yukito tells them she's just a cute mascot, which upsets the weak goddess. However, Bertrand's power does give them a bunch of new followers. Then, to attract more and more followers, Yukito starts putting conditions to believe in Mitama for using basic services like free food at Allural's restaurant and creates useful items for believers to use. As a starved Roy happily slaves away at Mitama's command, Yukito is able to increase her followers to 107. Later, as Mitama feels happy about her new powers, Yukito tells her that he'll use his knowledge of how religion was spread in his own world to easily fool the people in this world into believing, without having to explain complicated concepts like spirituality and the afterlife. As they're having this conversation, Silral and Allural corner the poor knight Bertrand and force her into a maid costume. She later approaches Yukito after dying inside, before he requests her information on the Imperial Knights. After learning Yukito only wants to protect the village, she tells him that the Emperor's real power comes from Archons, powerful knights who can even destroy an entire mountain. To verify his chances of surviving against such power, Yukito later asks Mitama if she can erase a mountain. She nods but tells him he'll need at least 10,000 followers. After Yukito gives up relying on Mitama, he later heads over to harass Bertrand again. Now in a cute pink suit, the abused knight wonders if she'll finally get PTSD. However, Yukito is only interested in her sword, wondering where its power comes from. Bertrand tells him that the Emperor grants these weapons to trusted warriors, and the secret to its powers is only known by him. Later, Yukito gathers the town's smartest people, which turns out to only be Silril and Clem. They discuss what to do about the religious following, and Yukito learns that while their village only has 2,000 people, there are more villages nearby. Before he can think about how to use this information, though, Silril seems to be tired and gets drunk. This prompts the rest of the followers to barge in and get drunk as well, ruining the mood. Thus, he gets the idea of converting those newer people through any means possible and increasing their chances of surviving. While everyone starts unhealthily coping with booze, somewhere else, Adder discusses the isolated villages with another Archon, Loki. Something makes Adder wonder if Loki wants to rebel against the Emperor before the crafty Archon changes the topic and tells her to investigate a certain place. Later that night, Yukito is alone with Silril. He asks her to help him understand the village situation, and she feels like it's just as bad as he fears. Recognizing his efforts to spread the religion to save their village, Sil thanks Yukito for working so hard, comforting him like an older sister. She tells him he doesn't have to overthink, and Yukito remembers something his father had once told him, remembering how he used strong martial artists to scare people into submitting. He gets the idea of converting newer people through any means possible and increasing their chances of surviving. Then, he heads out to think about his plan before encountering Clem. Clem learns that Yukito is planning on doing something that will change their world forever, and he surprisingly feels excited. As long as his village gets to live freely, Clem feels like he'll support anything Yukito does, and the boy promises to take this village into the future. The next day, as Bertrand is scouting the village in a new and even more degenerated outfit, she finds Adder. Realizing she's a strong opponent, she gets ready to fight, but Adder scans her very erotic opponent first. Upon learning that it's Bertrand in a woman's body, she wonders what happened to make her stray down this path. The poor knight is moved, wishing to be cursed for becoming Allural's bitch. However, despite her humiliating appearance, she remains determined to fight Adder and protect the village. Unfortunately, Bertrand's power does not match her strong emotions, and Adder picks her up like a sack of potatoes before heading over to see the village. The cold Archon's eyes widen as she sees the futuristic village now using electricity and powered machinery. To explain this, we rewind to Yukito discussing the village's future with Silril and Clem, knowing he needs to offer benefits and perks to attract people into converting. Yukito decides to use Mitama's powers to take the village into the future, and the little loli can only feel happy that he trusts her enough to believe in her. Thus, Mitama is forced to make tractors. Seeing the machine effortlessly harvest crops that'd take them days to cut immediately buys all the villagers, who quickly become devout believers of Mitama. Thus, she is able to regain a good portion of her powers and get over 900 followers. This increase in power already makes Mitama confident, or delusional enough to think she can invade the capital, but Yukito knows they're far from ready. At this moment, Allural stumbles into the tavern with a water bucket. The poor girl is unable to handle its weight and spills it, instead of peeking at her soaked clothes, though. The Sigma Yukito realizes he can use another thing to attract more believers. Using waterworks and sewerage, Yukito further improves the villagers' quality of life, allowing everyone better access to sanitation. This also results in the invention of swimming pools and swimsuits, and an excited Silril gets Allural to join her at a pool party. There, the entire village has fun, and Silril forces her shy sister to show off her outfit to Yukito. As a nearby Roy bleeds out from the heavenly sights around him, Yukito compliments Allural, who feels happier about her bold figure. Inside, the perverted Silril smirks, excited to dress her sister in even more revealing outfits. Meanwhile, a shriveled Mitama floats up, tired from pumping the village full of water. Yukito learns for the first time that it's actually one of her jobs as a land god, and the overworked loli gets offended that he knows so little about her. Thankfully, she later recovers her powers after the water gets her followers up to 16-0. However, Yukito knows they need even more followers, and to completely rope in everyone, he introduces another useful invention, electricity. Equipped with light bulbs, the tavern is now able to serve everyone at night, and Silril and Alluril dress up as cute bunny girls for extra service. Of course, everyone enjoys the sight of pretty thighs and chests, while Roy gets knocked out for trying to enjoy too much. Afterward, Yukito gets to the top of a hill to enjoy the village's lively view. With him, both Bertrand and Clen are impressed by his achievement, but they also notice a dying Mitama nearby. Yukito is a bit shaken but reassures them that she'll soon return to normal. Looking at the well-lit and pretty village, Clen sighed, feeling like even the country's emperor would enjoy such a unique view. At this, Yukito's eyes narrow, and he realizes that Clen knows quite a bit about the imperial capital. Knowing he found out, Clen reveals that he used to work for the emperor at a high rank. However, he was never banished to the village, and instead chose to live a free life here out of his free will. Then, Yukito wonders what exactly the emperor of this country is like. To compare gods with him, Yukito explains that a god in his world was either a symbol of something holy or the explanation behind inexplicable natural events. However, if this world had neither of those, it was weird that there were no large-scale natural events that would confuse the people. To answer this, Bertrand reveals that the Emperor has the Assembly, a force that uses explanations that directly come from to tell the common people. With this, an absolute faith in the Emperor and his ability to explain has been created within the people. This information leaves Yukito even more shocked, who wonders what the Emperor's goal is. The next morning, after Mitama gains over 2,000 followers, Yukito decides to expand their religion to other villages. However, before he can do that, he receives news of Bertrand being kidnapped by a strange girl. As he makes his way to Bertrand, Adder soaks Bertrand with water, grilling her about the machinery she sees as strange beasts. Confused about where the machines came from, she learns that Bertrand and the village made them themselves, which makes her think they betrayed the Emperor. Suddenly, she gets contacted by Loki and reports the situation to her. Adder wonders if a powerful Archon has betrayed the Emperor and helped the village. Then, she decides to simply blow the village up. And since Bertrand isn't giving her any valuable information about it, she decides to torture her a bit more. However, Yukito's group finally makes it, and Mitama saves the day. As Adder prepares to fight Mitama, Yukito picks up Bertrand and learns from her that they're fighting one of the legendary figures. Adder charges an attack, ready to take out Mitama. However, the land god is now very confident, having gained a massive following of firm believers. She summons a bunch of plant monsters that are able to fight Adder on equal grounds. This shocks everyone since Mitama hasn't even gotten to 10,000 followers yet. Thankfully, God proves to be useful again, and she is able to trap Adder in a massive cocoon. As Mitama hugs Yukito, happy to be useful to him, Adder suddenly breaks out of the giant prison. This time, though, she is in a new form, with giant hands and weapons floating behind her. Mitama feels a bit worried since she's low on power, but tries to fight her anyway. Yukito notices that the weakened Mitama stands no chance against the new Adder, whose attack seems way more powerful than he could imagine. Meanwhile, back at the tavern, Alluril worries about what is going on with Yukito's group. Despite the dangerous situation, she heads out with Silril and Clen to check up on them. Roy also runs out to chase after him. And back to Yukito, he notices Mitama doing her best to stand up for him. Seeing Yukito's trust in her, Mitama pulls out a trump card against the shocked and frightened Adder, who is in shock at having lost to a child. To fight for Yukito's sake, Mitama uses her status as a god and calls upon the rest of the gods to help her against Adder's final attack. However, the gods are about as loyal as a pet cat and leave her to die after noticing her pitiful amount of followers. Mitama survives the attack, but starts crying, feeling like she disappointed everyone. As Roy and Alluril's group reaches everyone, up in the air, Adder is shocked that a little child can match her own power. The idea that something inexplicable could happen scares her, and her little machine screws start coming loose. Throwing a childish tantrum, she decides to get rid of all her problems by simply destroying the village. Yukito can only watch helplessly as all his efforts go down the drain. Or not. Somehow, everything goes back to normal, and Adder realizes that what she had destroyed was merely an illusion. Suddenly, she finds out who created it, and Clen comes out from the group. In a very dramatic coming out party, the male Clen transforms into Loki, the female Archon. Adder prepares to fight the traitor Loki, but one of the strongest Archons simply teleports to Yukito's side, whispering into his ear. She tells him he has the best chance to assassinate the Emperor with her support. Watching them, Adder finally loses it and attacks Loki, who simply deflects her attack with an illusion before stabbing her. After suffering the pain, Adder finds out the stab was also an illusion and lays down, helplessly tied up. Having dealt with her, Loki turns to Yukito to take him to the Imperial Palace. Once they reach the palace, Loki leads Yukito to the Emperor's room. There, Adder starts crying to the Emperor for failing her mission, but the monarch seems calm. He calls out Yukito for trying to revive God and religion in his world, which shocks him since he doesn't think any person on this planet knows about them. The Emperor claims that people always fight over their gods, and he wants to prevent this meaningless bloodshed. So what did he do? Brainwashed and controlled them. Surely that's not extreme at all, right? As Yukito is thinking about what this means, Loki notices a bored Mitama casually walking up to a pillar before destroying it for no reason. This shocks everyone in the group, but Mitama explains that the pillar had a machine inside it that made them look like they were talking to a dead person. At this, Yukito turns around to see that the Emperor is already a skeleton. Adder, who has always been loyal to the Emperor, is devastated by this news, but Loki seems to have already known it. She explains that the Emperor had died hundreds of years ago, but his machines had maintained his illusion and controlled the Empire. Then, she kicks off the Emperor's skeleton and explains that the Emperor's machines form a very complex system, called the Assembly, which has controlled every part of the Empire. Yukito wonders how this world, where he had only seen medieval technology, had such advanced machinery centuries ago. A confident Mitama then explains to him that this empire was actually destroyed by natural disasters and wars thousands of years ago. However, a few remaining smart people had rebuilt a civilization with their technology to ensure their country never got destroyed again. They had also made sure to erase religion so people could never get divided, which offends Mitama as a god herself. However, Yukito seems to be going through an existential crisis at this completely random news and asks Mitama what planet he is currently on. She replies that it's the same Earth he has always lived on, which turns his world upside down. As Yukito almost pukes blood and rage, Mitama tells him that she fulfilled his wish of living in a godless world by simply sending him to a point in the future where people stopped believing in religion. The angry Yukito feels like he got tricked and is still at the mercy of a god despite his dying wish, but Loki breaks him out of his thoughts. She asks Mitama if she can break all the palace's machinery, much to Adder's horror. However, Loki points out that there is no need to follow the will of a dead person. The simple-minded Mitama easily agrees since anyone who tries to hurt Yukito is her enemy. However, Yukito is smart enough to attack Loki to check for her real intentions. She tries to defend herself, but he defeats her and pins her down. This gives Yukito confidence that Loki's powers aren't working in the palace, which truly shocks her. He reveals that the illusions are being created by the Emperor's machines, not her own powers, and threatens her to reveal her true intentions for destroying the palace. Loki sighs and tells him that she has always been sick of watching the Emperor coldly order hordes and hordes of people to die without reason. To learn more about him and his system, Loki researched the Empire and found out about an older civilization where people lived freely without being dominated by machines. After learning that these people also believed in powerful figures called gods, Loki became fascinated by the old world and decided to bring it back. To start her mission, she began living in the isolation camp villages, which had free people who lived happily. However, Loki knew that they, too, would one day be forced to die by the cruel Empire. During one of her days living in a village, though, she encountered Yukito, a strange man from nowhere who knew all about electricity, the internet, and other advanced technology. Seeming like Jesus Christ himself, his methods of converting fruit into wine and mentions of a god bringing him to a new world had caught Loki's interest. This is why Loki had brought a carriage to Yukito when Alluril had gotten taken away by the army, since she knew his god could save her. She recalls how Yukito had used Mitama's powers to also get advanced technology for their villagers, and the time he had decided to create a doctrine, a simple way of life that the religious believers would follow. Unfortunately, Roy's attempts at having women wear swimsuits 24/7 weren't well received, so Loki suggested the doctrine of living freely. Yukito had been impressed by this and agreed to use it. Loki was surprised that Yukito agreed so easily, and he told her that despite religion and absolute freedom being horrible for people, a level of freedom where they could live without problems and fighting was for the best. Then, he thanked her and told her she was the most reliable person in his group before leaving. This had truly made Loki curious about the guy she was working for, and Mitama had been left jealous. The cute goddess pouted and warned Loki, who was Clen at the time, to not fall for Yukito's riz. From this, Loki realized that Mitama could easily see through her disguise of being a man, and had finally started believing in the power of gods. At present, Loki tells Yukito that since the power of a god depends on the number of followers they have, she tried experimenting with it and went to a different village to get followers for herself. It turns out that Archons, who are named after the gods of previous civilizations, can also get followers, and similar to gods, their powers also increase for every follower. Having found this out, Loki now plans on becoming a god herself and restoring the world to its previous era. It's not like she wants power and authority for herself, right? The naive Adder protests against this idea, but Loki shatters her world by revealing all the other Archons had already agreed to overthrow the Emperor and become gods themselves. Yukito agrees with Loki's plan, knowing that he'll need a plan to defend his village after the rest of the Archons start getting powerful. With Mitama's help, Loki destroys the Imperial Castle, bringing a new age to the Empire. Loki turns around and looks at Yukito with interest, but he still seems to have the same plan, patting his adopted daughter, goddess's head. He boldly tells Loki she'll become the most powerful of them all, and the fake Archons can't match a real god. Her eyes narrow with interest, and the stage is set for a new battle. From a hilltop nearby, a skimpily dressed woman watches the Imperial Castle get demolished and promises to change the world for a person called Tauka. Afterward, Yukito's group returns to the village and holds a massive celebration of the Empire's defeat. Yukito watches as everyone parties like a bunch of college kids, not caring that the new Archons could easily have them all killed. Then, he turns around to see Loki relaxing and wonders why she came back with him. She tells him that she just wanted to have one last party with her friends before they become sworn enemies. Yukito finds her behavior strange, and Loki agrees. Then, Roy butts in, saying he was surprised his best friend was a girl. Unable to keep his meat scepter in his pants, Roy tries to take advantage of Loki, but surprisingly, she doesn't seem to mind. He gets more and more excited that his friend is finally giving him some, but an illusion disappears to reveal him touching a poor farmer. Before finishing her drink and leaving, Loki notes that Yukito seems quite confident and prepared to face her and the rest of the Archons. Mitama chimes in and tells her she'll destroy everyone in Yukito's path, but he reminds her that she got folded like a pancake against Adder. Then, Loki confidently chuckles before leaving and tells Yukito he can have a now powerless Adder. He warns her that no matter what she tries, he will never let her hurt his village, and a confident Loki finally leaves after bidding everyone farewell. Nearby, Adder seems to have lost her will to live, but Alluril uses the world's most effective way to cheer someone up: ice cream. Outside, as Loki is leaving, she gets confronted by Bertrand, who seems determined to end her right there. Loki chuckles before Bertrand realizes she turned back into a man. Happy that she can stop being transgender against her will, Bertrand starts celebrating her new body. However, with a snap of her fingers, Loki breaks the illusion, revealing to the devastated Bertrand that she can still use her powers. The fallen knight then gets up, determined to follow Loki to the capital. For the loyal knight, she doesn't want Loki to go around abusing her powers in the city, and she agrees to bring her along. Back in the village, after the end of the celebration, everyone leaves and the tavern gets empty. Silril leaves Yukito after telling him that Adder is his responsibility. Yukito feels annoyed that he now has to deal with her, but seeing that Adder is still more gloomy than a black hole, he decides to cheer her up. He tells her to stop moaning about everything, which makes her upset at him. However, Yukito points out that if he hadn't stopped the Emperor, he and his friends would have gotten killed, helpless against his logic. Adder starts crying, before he tells her that he has a way to restore the Emperor's assembly. According to Yukito, if an Archon defeats the other Archons and steals their powers, they might be able to turn into a real god. He offers to help Adder achieve this, which surprises her. However, Yukito tells her that she is his only weapon against the enemy Archons, but doesn't forget to make her wet for him by saying he just couldn't bear seeing a cute girl cry. This easily wins over the simple-minded Adder, and Yukito grins at how easy it is to manipulate young girls. Then, he makes her sit down and feeds her some ice cream, the heavenly taste of which brings Adder to tears. Watching the two of them share this sweet moment, Alluril sulks in a corner, heartbroken that her crush is a lolicon. The next day, Yukito announces that his religion will now have another god, Adder, who is responsible for protecting everyone. The heartbroken Mitama watches as Adder gains half her followers, which allows her to use her combat powers. Now, Yukito has someone good at fighting at his side as well. Somewhere else, we see a very suspicious-looking temple being managed by a nerdy girl. Meanwhile, Yukito and his group go around other villages, saving people from beasts, and converting them to Mitama's religion after offering them all their benefits. As Mitama notices how much Adder enjoys her ice cream, she realizes that the Protector Archon has managed to gain more followers than her. Then, Yukito learns from Silril that a certain Archon known as Dakini has been gaining a lot of followers. Mitama and Adder decide that they'll destroy her. However, Yukito warns them to not get too arrogant and suggests invading her followers from the inside. With Silril and Roy, he makes a plan against the Archon of Love. Yukito points out that the power of love probably means she is an Archon related to lust or the sacred act of sex. This shocks everyone, and Silril chooses to remain home for the mission. Later, Yukito heads out and reaches Dakina's temple. Inside, they meet Rich, the temple's legendary attendant who is known to be the place's biggest pervert. Apparently, just talking to Rich can lead a person to heaven, and Yukito watches the deranged temple worshippers lose their shit over her. Rich takes the group to Dakini's room for their first time joining. They go in, expecting to meet someone scary, but are shocked to find that Dakini is your average Twitch thought but with godly powers. She quickly leaves after telling the group to just enjoy themselves, and Yukito wonders why it was so easy to win her over. However, suddenly, his heart starts throbbing, and Aluril approaches him with Hegel eyes. Yukito realizes Dakini's powers are activating his neurons and is unable to stop Aluril from getting close to him. However, before he can rearrange Aluril's insides, a naked Roy breaks into their room's wall, and a falling stone hits and knocks out Aluril. Mitama comes out with a terrifying glare, upset that Roy tried to assault her. She tries to gain Yukito's sympathy and make him her follower, but when he refuses, she is forced to give up. Roy then gets up, upset that Mitama and the rest of the girls refused him, and runs back through the hole he came from. Meanwhile, Dakini tells Rich her ritual was completed, before ordering her to look after the newbies. Rich enters their room but is shocked to find Mitama restoring the room's walls with her power. Suddenly, Yukito pins her to a wall and warns her to keep it a secret. Rich stubbornly refuses, so he knocks off her special glasses before preparing to punish her. Somehow, the girl gets excited by the forceful abuse, which is actually only her own twisted fantasy. Yukito watches as she randomly gets on her knees from pleasure, wondering what made her screws so loose. Then, Yukito learns that despite being the manager of all the perverts, Rich is actually an innocent maiden who has never committed dirty acts. As she cries on the floor, feeling like she got dirtied in real life, a predatory monster glares at Yukito for doing unspeakable acts behind her back. He explains that Rich climaxed from her own words before the attendant wonders how Yukito's group survived Dakini's powers. Upon learning that Mitama is unaffected by her powers as a goddess, Rich realizes she's strong enough to face Dakini. Suddenly, the loyal attendant asks for the surprised Yukito and Mitama's help in destroying Dakini's group. Somewhere else, we see Loki observe the imperial capital with Bertrand. Watching how chaotic it has become, she promises Bertrand that she'll defeat all the Archons and become the one true god to restore it back to its glory. Back at Dakini's temple, poor Roy gets humiliated into having a public session, and the Archon watches him with interest. Inside Rich's room, she complains to Yukito that she never wanted to be a part of this weird cult, but was forced to come along when her entire village gave in to their desires and converted. Unfortunately, due to loving forbidden books with knowledge of sexual acts, the followers of the cult had gotten convinced that with her knowledge, Rich was the group's biggest hoe. Sadly, the poor girl had been forced to manage a group because of her supposed experience. Feeling tired of the sect, she asks for Yukito's help in destroying it, before turning to discuss the forbidden books with an excited Aluril. Suddenly, Mitama notices her followers going down and starts crying. We are shifted to the village, where a group of people watches Adder easily take down a massive beast. Feeling her powers grow, Adder turns to ask Sil why she didn't go with Yukito's group. She turns into a tsundere, saying it wasn't like she was too embarrassed to go to such a perverted place or anything. Back at Dakini's temple, Rich takes out Yukito's group to meet some newbies, who try to get them into a session. However, she helps them and refuses them. After they leave, Yukito starts wondering where his best friend Roy went. Then, Rich asks him how he plans on taking Dakini down, and Yukito asks her if Dakini always stays at this temple. Rich reveals that Dakini has other temples around the country, and she visits each of them for a few days. This gives Yukito the answer he needs. But Aluril notices Mitama dying from her lack of followers. Yukito explains that since they're away from the village, faith in Mitama has been dropping rapidly. To get Mitama to do something for him before her powers completely die out, Yukito offers to become her follower if she helps him. Somewhere else in the temple, Dakini watches a party of love going on. However, she wonders that despite her follower count increasing so much, her powers seem to be the same. Suddenly, she gets approached by a bunch of excited men with some strange toys by their side. She learns that these toys and medicines have reignited their passions, and they received them from Rich, who has been giving everyone lessons on love. Back to Rich, Yukito smirks while watching her teach a class, knowing that everyone at this temple loves Rich more than the absent Dakini. Suddenly, an angry Dakini bursts into the room. She engages in a war of words with Rich, calling her out for trying to cause a rebellion in her subjects. Rich pretends to only be helping her goddess out, but Dakini orders her and her new helpers, Yukito's group, to be arrested and punished. Her guards come forth, and Yukito is shocked to see Roy with them. The deranged pervert starts screaming about how Dakini, who helped him learn the true powers of his right hand, is his real goddess. The group is then taken away and bound in a spot for their punishment. There, Roy starts forgetting himself and tries to take advantage of the girls, but Dakini brings him back to his senses. Then, in front of a massive audience, she questions why Rich tried to divide her people. As the people around them feel shocked that the loyal Rich would betray their goddess, she suddenly begins crying in the hopeless situation. However, Rich doesn't seem afraid of losing her life. Instead, she begs for Dakini to have her executed, saying it is the only punishment suitable for her betrayal. This surprises Dakini and everyone else, while Yukito inwardly grins, knowing that Rich's ability as a public speaker and leader is far greater than the love of Archons. Seeing her sincere tears, the people around them start begging Dakini to spare Rich's life. Meanwhile, Yukito recalls the torture he suffered while trying to train her how to act. When Rich heard that he would train her body for the event, she immediately started fantasizing about getting abused again, much to Yukito's utter disappointment. However, what really happened was that Yukito had to make her practice acting hundreds of times over, throwing shoes and items at her each time she did it wrong. Finally, after countless drills and screaming from Yukito, Rich deluded herself into sincerely acting like a noble, devoted servant. This acting was now revealing its power, as Rich's sincere words and heart-touching emotion made everyone around her start crying. Even the Wild Roy had started questioning Dakini's intentions. Seeing everyone around her plead for mercy, Dakini reluctantly lets Yukito's group go, knowing that Yukito, the boy Loki warned her about, is behind all of it. She orders to throw them all into a prison, where Roy comes in and starts screaming at Mitama for not accepting his love. Both Rich and Alluro get disgusted that he's trying to make moves on the childlike goddess, while somewhere else, we see Dakini angrily think about what to do with her once loyal servant. She sends her powerful soldiers to the prison. Yukito and his group watch with horror as a man who looks like a buff Ezio from Assassin's Creed bursts into their cell. Now, they're faced with certain death if they don't act fast. While the group is going through this trial, we are shown a flashback of Dakini's memories. Before she had started her job as the Love Archon, the Emperor had given her some instructions. Dakini felt excited to help people love each other. However, the Emperor had other ideas. He instructed her to make people forget how to love, saying it would produce unnecessary children. To control the population, the Emperor decided to create babies artificially, much to Dakini's anger. Thus, Dakini would go around making people forget how to love, forced to obey the Emperor's orders despite hating the idea. She had gotten used to performing her duty, and thousands of years passed like this. One day, though, Dakini discovered something terrifying. After years of getting no bitches, the people in the Empire had entirely lost their fertility and desire. This outcome enabled the Emperor to start artificially regulating the population by using lab babies instead of real ones. However, despite losing her reason to exist, Dakini decided to carry on. She started distributing books with knowledge of sexual acts to rebel against the Emperor. Although the books would soon become illegal, she was successful at having introduced them to the people through black market. However, one day, Dakini found someone amazing. Near a riverbank, she found a little girl called Tauka enjoying one of her secret books and learned that this little girl could still feel the emotions of love and desire. Despite it being weird for such a young girl to be interested in this stuff, Dakini quickly grew attached to her since she was different from the Empire's cold people. Even though what she was doing was practically grooming, nobody stopped the powerful Archon from further corrupting the little girl. However, Tauka would soon be discovered by the Empire as a mutant for feeling love and sent out to an isolation camp. Dakini let Tauka be taken away since she thought the free life in the villages would be better for her anyway. Unfortunately, one day, while looking for Tauka, Dakini found her killed after she had found a lover and had a child with them in the village. The people of the village, who had never seen a baby being born naturally, treated both mother and child like monsters. Dakini screamed and cried, but none of it could bring her friend back. From then on, Dakini had promised her fallen friend to bring back a world where people could love, have children, and form families, no matter the cost. We return to the present from this memory as Yukito's group faces the giant soldier. Suddenly, a beam of energy bursts into the room and takes the guard out, revealing Adder and Silverol as the heroes. The stone-cold Mitama suddenly comes to life from pure saltiness as she notices Adder's follower count has doubled to over 6,000. Yukito's group then turns around to run away, and a heartbroken Mitama learns that Yukito planned to invade Dakini's group while letting Adder stay behind and get all of Mitama's followers to strengthen her powers. Suddenly, their path gets blocked by Dakini herself, who doesn't seem very amused. However, before she can attack, she notices a book in Rick's hand, shocked that it's the same book Tauka used to own. Before she can ask her about it, Dakini gets blasted into a wall by Adder. She tries using her lust powers to bring Adder down, but the cold Archon doesn't seem too interested. This angers Dakini, who powers up to her true form. It turns out that she has a massive 14,000 plus followers, and Yukito's group seems to be in big trouble. Meanwhile, somewhere else, we see Rich running with a confused Mitama in her arms. She tells the protesting goddess to stop squirming since Yukito needs her for their success. This calms down Mitama, while Rich wonders why Dakini knows her mother's name. Back to Dakini, she summons a few dangerous-looking attacks, but all they do is leave some strange seals on all the girls' bodies. Eyes red with desire, the girls surround Yukito in every man's dream. However, before our exhausted main character can lose his virginity, Mitama comes to the rescue and pushes Dakini away with her plant tentacles. Dakini looks at Mitama and Rich standing to confront her. She thinks Mitama is some random bottom-tier Archon, which enraged the goddess. But behind her, Rich suddenly announces that she's taking Dakini's followers and splitting off to follow Mitama instead. Now armed with Mitama's toys and Dakini's knowledge, all of the temple goers agree. However, the Archon doesn't seem to care about losing a few followers. Suddenly, Mitama shows her advantage as a true god and shuts off a shocked Dakini's powers. Mitama explains that since Dakini is a fake god, she must be getting her powers from the real Dakini. Thus, she claims that she had threatened the puny Dakini into taking her godly powers away from the Archon. However, the showmakers give us a fact check by showing what had really happened. Poor Mitama, who had basically no followers, had to kneel and beg the real Dakini to take her power away just for Yukito's sake. Back to the fight, Dakini tries to attack again. But without her powers, she can't do any damage. Adder, who has now recovered from her stunned state, easily pushes her back. Realizing she's at a disadvantage, Dakini starts running away from the temple and sees Roy at the entrance. She leaves him behind to guard the place for her, but suddenly, Roy grabs the confused goddess. He starts violating her, claiming that if he went for another woman, Mitama would finally like him. Of course, this makes every girl around him look at him with pure disgust, but Roy doesn't seem to care. Using this opportunity, Adder charges and takes out the trapped Dakini. Lying on the ground, the defeated Dakini wonders how she lost with so many followers. Yukito tells her that it's because she fights alone, and he has a whole village by his side. Then, Rich approaches her, and Dakini gets mad that someone from the same village as her friend Tauka would betray her. However, this confirms to Rich that she knew her mother, and she reveals that she's Tauka's daughter to her. Seeing the book in Rich's hands, Dakini's eyes widen, and she recalls a memory of her best friend. A young Tauka had told Dakini that it was her greatest wish to have a baby with the person she liked and that her child would one day grow up and become friends with her. Seeing said child in front of her very own eyes, Dakini starts crying from happiness that Tauka's dream was fulfilled, filled with love and sadness from all the memories of her. Later, Dakini is sent to a prison, where the delusional pervert Roy thinks he can torture her as he wants. However, after Silril and Alluril drag him away to put him in his place, Yukito tells Dakini to get all her followers to start believing in Mitama. When she refuses, he leaves after threatening to end her existence. Her eyes narrow, knowing that if she was killed, Yukito wouldn't be able to get all of her followers. Thus, she waits for her chance, but is surprised when Rich enters her cell. The girl puts a coat on her naked body, before asking what her relationship with her mother was. Dakini responds that Tauka was her best friend, and she had always wanted to change the world that had killed her. Rich smiles, saying that if she really was her mother's friend, she would definitely take her side. She leaves, saying she'll convince Yukito to let her work with him. Then, Rich quickly returns with a defeated Yukito, now turned into a submissive and bound pig. Dakini is shocked, but it seems like the real deal. The Dami Mommy Rich humiliates Yukito and orders him to never bother Dakini again. The sad pig quietly agrees, and Rich forces him to release all of his natural milkshakes in front of Dakini, who smiles at her power. She feels happy that her friend's daughter is already such a strong Dami Mommy before Rich frees her from her chains. Then she requests Dakini to let her manage the branch of followers that left her, saying she wants to restore them back to her. Dakini agrees, happy to work with a person whom she has erotically bonded with for centuries. While nearby on the ground, Yukito seems completely in his senses. He wonders what exactly this strange erotic bond is. It turns out, all of Yukito's pig acting was just a setup to convince Dakini. He had planned to get Dakini's followers who had gone with Rich to side with Mitama, and Rich had thought of a strategy that would convince Dakini to let her manage them. Thus, she forcefully strapped Yukito into a dungeon and forced him to act like a pig, taking all her revenge from the time he had forced her to learn how to act. Yukito felt terrified but was forced into submission by a sadistic Rich using the same tactics he did with her. Even Uluril and her sister were drawn by their curiosity and joined in on the acting lessons. Later, while returning home, Yukito shivers while recalling this unpleasant memory, while Silril feels like he isn't just acting at that point. On their way, Mitama feels happy that her followers have gone over 10,000. All thanks to Rich now managing a part of Dakini's followers. As Mitama's worshipper, Rich's followers easily flowed to a now smug Mitama. Yukito feels like Dakini might have known about his plan, but pretended to follow along just for Rich's sake. Suddenly, the group is stopped by a strange beast, which a confident Mitama prepares to take out. However, a simple pew-pew blast from Adder easily takes it out, which angers Mitama. She notices that somehow, Adder has even more followers than her, which upsets her even more. However, they have a bigger problem at hand, since one monster turns into 100 and Mitama is forced to shield everyone with her plants. The group wonders what is happening, before noticing a monster horde charging towards their village. They rush home, only to find every single building destroyed. Thankfully, their hearts calm down upon learning that the villagers had already fled to some hiding spots. Now without their homes, everyone requests Mitama to rebuild their village for them. The egoistic goddess, who had just gotten her powers back, refused to use them all up again. However, everyone started begging her to save them with her divine powers, which made her agree in the heat of the moment. Thus, with her power, Mitama rebuilds the entire village, which a strange hooded woman watches from a nearby mountain. Curious about Mitama's powers, she orders some strange beasts to attack the village again. However, the monsters turn on her and knock the confused Archon down. Back in the village, everyone celebrates its rebirth in the tavern. There, Silril thanks Yukito, thinking that he must care quite a lot about the village to have it immediately restored. However, he reveals that he needed to quickly rebuild it since the followers of their religion only believe because of the benefits Mitama and Adder give them, and not because they feel a deep connection with either of the two goddesses. As they are having this conversation, a villager suddenly bursts in, saying Roy is in danger. They rush out to find Roy carrying a strange, rather well-rounded woman. He sets the woman down, preparing to completely diagnose her body, but the woman quickly rejects him. As Roy mopes in his sadness, the woman starts pretending that she needs a cute person's help once again. Despite nobody getting fooled by her act, Yukito sends Adder to check in on her. The Archon warily asks the woman who she is, but suddenly she gets assaulted. Yukito and the rest watch in pure awe as the woman kisses a trembling Adder, who has no time to react. After giving Adder a free mouthwash, she lets her go before introducing herself as Gaia, a main Archon. She tells Yukito that she has the power to summon strange beasts, which immediately makes him distract and attack her. Terrified, Gaia quickly explains that the beasts were out of control, which is why she also got attacked by them. Later in the tavern, as Gaia happily sits next to the cute Mitama, she explains that she only has 2 followers, which leads to her breasts getting too powerful and disobeying her. Then, she tells Yukito her goal of taking down Loki, who had started a war between all the Archons. Seeing that she is willing to help him, Yukito takes Gaia with the group to the Imperial capital the next day. However, they find a massive wall blocking the city. Apparently, Loki was really inspired by Donald Trump. Before Mitama can bash through the wall with her powers, Gaia makes a little sparrow that tries flying towards the wall. However, a laser beam immediately shoots it, proving that the group needs another way to enter. Suddenly, though, a Black Knight jumps out, ready to attack. Everyone recognizes her as Bertrand, who claims that she has changed and become a new person. However, Adder easily destroys her strong armor. Bertrand suddenly starts crying to the group to help her break out of this armor that made her forget pain. Suddenly, Loki appears behind the group and Yukito attacks her. The crafty Archon reappears behind him, saying she wouldn't really use her true form to talk to them. Then, she wonders what Yukito is doing with Gaia. And before he can explain, Mitama threatens to take her down with her 10,000 followers. However, Loki seems amused by this number, revealing that she already has the capital's population of 1 million on her side. This completely shatters Mama's pride, but Yukito seems unimpressed. He threatens Loki that if she had tried to truly attack him with this tiny amount of followers, she would have immediately been killed. This shocks Loki, and she watches as he confidently leaves his car with his group. On their way back, everyone seems impressed by Yukito's confidence. However, he reveals to the terrified group that he was only acting, and if Loki had actually attacked them, they would all have been ice-guyed. Later at home, Yukito asks Bertrand what happened to the capital. She reveals that despite Loki's plans to change the world, all she did was merely use the civilians as her followers, and made them live as slaves like the previous emperor did. Yukito realizes that Loki just wants power before he tells everyone that since she is pretending to be the emperor, they could expose her to take her down. However, to do this, Yukito first needs a massive army of his own followers and prepares to become a top music producer. Afterward, the group organizes a concert, with all the girls except Mitama on stage. Watching from a distance, Prod Yukito smiles at his efforts, while a tied-up Mitama cries about being forced to stay in the shadows. What had happened was that after Yukito had announced his plans of becoming a music producer, Mitama had happily offered to become his idol. However, recalling the last time Mitama tried to act as an idol, Yukito knew better than to use her, and thus told the rest of the girls they'd form a band. Though, he found out that the people in this world didn't even know about music, and trained all the girls to play at a professional level. Unfortunately, Bertrand just couldn't get the hang of it, and the cold Yukito left her in tears despite her crying that she'd practiced to get better. At present, Yukito watches as the concert goes smoothly. Mitama seems angry at him for stopping her but soon cheers up upon finding her powers quickly growing. Yukito explains that before this event, all their believers just believed in getting their benefits. Now, using the power of music exclusive to them, Yukito created a bond between all the believers themselves and their religion, increasing their faith in Mitama's power. Now powered up, Mitama once again feels like she's the strongest in the world, but Yukito stops her before she does something stupid again. He later talks to a crying Bertrand, telling her that she's completely useless as a fighter and musician. The poor girl begs Yukito to not abandon her, and he hugs her, saying she is still a useful person. This surprises her, and she gets prepared to do whatever he wants. Thus, Yukito sends Bertrand on her assignment, following Gaia to track her daily activities. She follows Gaia everywhere she goes, and finds her trying to talk to orphaned children. Gaia's activities look very suspicious. However, she manages to get rejected by every single kid she finds. Just as Bertrand feels like Gaia is looking for kids to throw in her basement, she pulls up to an unidentified house. Inside, Bertrand is shocked to find a surprisingly normal family of orphaned kids. She reports this to Yukito, who realizes that Gaia uses family as followers, who are very good at providing powers to their god. However, he feels that there is something strange about her secret activities, and prepares to take Gaia down just in case. Yukito then thanks Bertrand, who shyly clutches her chest with happiness. Later, to prepare for dealing with Gaia, Yukito waits outside for someone but is surprised to see Bertrand instead. The knight suddenly attacks him and tears off his clothes, and Yukito realizes she's under Dakini's spell. The love Archon comes out, not planning to let Yukito go, and the once male Bertrand forgets all of her pride and prepares to eat Yukito's meat stick. However, before that can happen, Rich forces Dakini to stop, which returns Bertrand to her senses. Embarrassed, the poor knight hides herself, and Dakini cruelly teases her for forgetting all her manliness and turning into a true girl. Unable to accept this reality, Bertrand runs away crying. Yukito gets up, angry at Dakini, who suddenly bursts into a dance. Rich explains that Yukito's music is really popular within their cult for their love sessions, and Yukito tells her he is more than happy to help an ally. However, Dakini stops dancing, knowing he needs her help. Somewhere else, we see Gaia swimming deep in a lake and observing something with a smile. Back at Gaia's house, the kids called Fao, Cain, Cyan, and Kai are living their normal lives. They visit a nearby lake to get some water, where a strange but friendly Dakini approaches them. She makes friends with the kids, and after a few days, Kai and Cyan, the older kids, grow suspicious of Dakini's intentions. However, they see their siblings having a good time with her. Dakini seems to genuinely like these kids, wanting to help them without using her powers. She recalls Yukito's words that she needs to break Gaia's family since she is probably using these children as family to power up her own plans. Dakini, who had a soft spot for children because of her past, easily agreed, and Yukito chuckled, knowing he had just successfully manipulated her feelings. However, he felt surprised as he started to cry, remembering how his own father used him for his own sake. Back at the lake, Kai and Cyan grow more and more suspicious of Dakini, remembering that their mother ordered them to never talk to anyone outside their family. The love Archon tries to convince them to play with her but is shocked to notice Cyan with a hateful expression muttering that Dakini doesn't even know what a real family. She summons a few strange beasts that Gaia created and orders them to attack Dakini and the other children. The Archon is shocked, knowing that she can't defeat the beasts without her powers. Thus, she takes the only option she has, running for her life with the kids. She curses Yukito for taking her followers and powers away, while Kai and Cyan chase her. The older sister Cyan seems enraged at Dakini for trying to break apart her family. She remembers how she was also created as an artificial baby. After becoming a little girl, the assembly assigned her to some new parents as their child. While Cyan's new family wasn't anything special, they treated her well, and she felt happy living with these new parents. However, one day, while having a nice family dinner with her parents, Cyan's world would suddenly break apart. Knights knocked at her house's door with orders to take her father away for the end-of-life ceremony. The man calmly accepted his fate, but the attached little girl couldn't bear to see him being taken away. This made the knights mark her as a deviant who was afraid of the Emperor's system, and Cyan's parents agreed to have her sent to an isolation camp, much to her shock and horror. After that day, Cyan met Kai while having lost all hope of getting a real family. While being transported to an isolation camp, their carriage got attacked by a strange beast, and Gaia appeared to save the two kids. She listened to their stories and showed her complete sympathy for them. However, the heartbroken Cyan remained unconvinced and hit Gaia in frustration. To her surprise, Gaia didn't mind and kept hugging her, hoping to let her vent her frustrations. This finally won Cyan over, and just after suffering from such a huge trauma, she decided to trust Gaia and build another family with her. At present, she chases Dakini, determined to protect her family no matter what. However, she stops in surprise when she sees the strange beast dead ahead. A relieved Dakini thanks Adder's group for saving her, and Yukito prepares to capture Cyan and Kai. However, the ground suddenly starts to shake, and Mitama tells everyone to escape. Suddenly, Gaia pops out of nowhere, truly furious with the group's actions. She summons a massive beast, which basically looks like an overgrown earthworm. However, the creepy thing is nothing to laugh at, and Cyan and Kai happily rush to their mother, Gaia. She seems happy that they didn't listen to Yukito's group, but her voice grows cold, and she quickly dissolves the confused kids in mud. Having made use of the kids, Gaia's final words to them are that she herself doesn't know or care about what a real family. Then, she looks at her beast, named Typhon, which is vastly stronger than the Archons of the world. Mitama blocks one of the creature's powerful attacks. However, it is clear that it's too strong for her. Yukito suddenly makes her bow, asking her to pray to the original Gaia to make it calm down. However, a frustrated Mitama reveals that Gaia is an animalistic god who won't listen to her words. Thus, just when it looks like it's over for Yukito and his friends, a familiar car suddenly pulls up with Allurel and Silurel inside it. Allurel slams the accelerator, and they barely manage to make it away from the massive worm. As they put some distance between the beast, one of Gaia's kids, Yushi, reads an old book and reveals that it's the most powerful beast she can summon. Yukito is surprised that the kid can understand the book, and he realizes he can use this ability for something useful. After Yukito asks the child for a favor, Silurel and Allurel feel relieved that they've gotten away from the monster. Psyche, just when they thought they had gotten away, the ground around the group's car started shaking again, and another gigantic worm head popped up. It turns out that Typhon is so big that its main body extends all the way to its current location. As Allurel panics, one of the monster's tentacles suddenly stabs through Yukito, leaving everyone speechless and horrified. With a sad but determined tone, Mitama runs up and jumps on the tentacle, determined to save Yukito no matter what. The rest of the group silently watches as both Mitama and Yukito get eaten by the monster before leaving. Once they return home, both Roy and Bertrand are devastated by the news. Silurel confirms to the guilty children that his death wasn't their fault, but is faced with the problem of keeping their village and religion together in his absence. Shifting to Typhon's belly, we then see a naked Yukito inside, surprised to find himself alive. He sees a drained Mitama nearby and a battle-ready Gaia in front of him, who seems upset that Yukito can't die. It turns out that Mitama had been reviving him every time Gaia or Typhon killed him. Gaia then takes advantage of the helpless Yukito and gets a kiss from him, before he notices that Typhon is headed towards the Imperial capital, remembering that it was Gaia's goal to destroy Loki. Meanwhile, back at the village, Allurel grows hopeful, believing that the goddess Mitama will surely protect Yukito. The rest of the villagers get fired up as well before Allurel's pendant starts glowing. Out of it, the little Mitama comes out and writes some ancient characters on the floor. Yushi is able to read the language and tells everyone that Yukito is still alive, but needs their help. Excited by the news, they get up and prepare to head out together. Back to Typhon's belly, Yukito notices Kai and Cyan alive nearby. He wonders if Gaia thinks she can win, and she seems very confident in Typhon's abilities. Then, she starts rambling about her past like a demented grandma, saying that she is the only one who remembers the Archon's history. Gaia recalls that she was an innocent young girl, used by her cult leader mother as an idol for their worshippers. Tired of being abused, she had ended her selfish mother before running to the Imperial capital. There, the orphan who had never seen a family was genetically modified and turned into an Archon for the Emperor. At present, Gaia leans in close to Yukito, angry that he seems just like her own mother, a person who manipulates others for their own good. Yukito tries to deny it, but Gaia's cold voice makes him lose confidence in himself. He remembers that in his previous life, his father had also used him for his own sake, and thus Yukito himself did not know how to interact with other people with sincere emotions. Gaia tells Yukito that he is just like her since she is also used to her mother's selfish ways. She seems to hate the gods and archons, beings who she thinks are selfish and manipulative, and promises to destroy them and their worshippers. Yukito seems hopeless after hearing her words, but suddenly Allurel's voice breaks him out of his trance. Looking at Typhon's communication screen, he sees the girl's band. It looks like his manipulation worked so well that the girls completely forgave him for all his lies. They all remind him that despite his manipulation, he had always done his best to support them and protect their village. Gaia seems surprised by this, but the girls seem to have a plan to defeat her. The band begins singing a soulful concert, aiming to send their powers to help Mitama. Roy, Bertrand, and Rich watch from the audience, doing their best to rile up the crowd. Suddenly, Adder turns to Bertrand, handing her the guitar before leaving for combat. Despite having no experience, Bertrand quickly grows excited and decides to do her best for her friend. She releases a massive attack, and the drummer Dakini, who replaced Gaia in the band, cheers her on. However, her friend Rich comes behind her with a sly smirk, saying that she shouldn't be left behind either. To enhance Dakini's love powers, Rich begins helping her enjoy herself in front of a massive audience, which greatly boosts her powers. The rest of the group is shocked as a massive attack from Dakini slows down Typhon. She seems to be completely absorbed in her very sus cuddling with Rich, though, and the group focuses its attention back on the monster, back inside Typhon's belly. The kids wonder if the Archon's increased power is enough to take the monster down, but they are proven wrong when it easily breaks free from the attacks and starts pushing back, just when it looks like the entire concert is about to get flattened. Mitama's tentacles come out and quickly stop Typhon. Inside its belly, Gaia remains confident that despite Mitama's power-up, she would still be no match for the oversized worm. To deal with her, Yukito, who seems to have a foggy mind, asks Mitama to help him break free of his chains. However, the goddess seems to be very tired and requests that to give her the power boost she needs, he becomes her follower. This time, Yukito finally agrees, and Mitama seems so overjoyed that her power triples and she easily breaks his restraints with a sword. Then, as she asks Yukito to finally believe in her, his eyes suddenly grow cold and he pretends to have forgotten because of his foggy mind. Once again deceived by the master manipulator, the master at baiting, Mitama helplessly watches as Yukito realizes the strategy for defeating the unstoppable Typhon, defeating his mother, Gaia. He charges her with his bare hands, but is no match for the strong Gaia. However, Yukito simply comes back to life and attacks her again. Meanwhile, outside Typhon, the girls realize they need to use their final plan. They dress Adder up in a cute costume, and she begins talking to her excited followers. The people think that Adder will finally sing. However, they get heartbroken when she announces retirement as a goddess. Then, Adder cutely requests everyone to start following her goddess, Mitama instead, but the crowd seems unconvinced. To take care of this, Rich grins and suddenly offers Adder's services at the Love Temple. Excited to get the shocked Adder's personally used bathwater, the crowd of sweaty men grows wild and immediately starts pouring all its faith into Mitama. Back inside Typhon, Mitama feels a surge of power from this new group of survivors and grows strong enough to break her own restraints. Now, Yukito can revive over and over again to fight Gaia, who seems shocked that he's broken enough to ignore the pain of death just to fight her. However, as she remains determined to keep defeating Yukito again and again, she gets backed into a corner where a tentacle from Mitama pierces through her. This seems to be Yukito's real plan. And after Gaia's defeat, Typhon explodes into a billion worm fragments. Yukito goes unconscious but faintly hears Mom's voice. Outside Typhon, Mitama appears with a safe but unconscious Yukito and collapses from exhaustion. Yukito's group rushes towards him with relief, while Gaia's kids notice her lying down nearby. Kai, who feels betrayed, tries to kill her, but Cyan stops him, saying she doesn't want that. Gaia seems to have accepted her death, saying that she has always been a twisted person who never knew how to cherish others. When Cyan asks her why she then tried to have a family, she answers that perhaps she just wanted to experience a real family, even if she didn't know what it truly meant. This makes Cyan cry, who tells her that despite her not being the perfect parent, Gaia still tried her best for her, and during the time she spent with her, she felt like she had a real family. Then she hugs Gaia, wanting to start over with her. Meanwhile, after finishing everything, Yukito's group decides to hold a massive party. Adder, who is free from her combat duties, begins consuming more ice cream than the average American in their lifetime. Somewhere else on a table, Gaia and her kids reunite, while Yukito approaches her, saying that while he'll let her live, he'll have Kai watch her. Gaia wonders what he'll do if she starts getting new followers, but Yukito warns her that he won't let that happen. It turns out, he had a private conversation with Kai, knowing that the only reason he was with Gaia was because he liked Cyan. The blushing kid tried to deny it, but Yukito forced him to keep an eye on Gaia just to protect his crush. At present, Yukito watches everyone celebrate while noting that Mitama's followers have gone over 30,000. He seems surprised that they increased so much since the concert didn't have that many people. Suddenly, Loki's familiar voice interrupts his thoughts, and she explains that she helped him out a bit to take out Typhon. She leaves after having explained herself, with Yukito knowing that his battle isn't over just yet. Yukito goes back to his group, where everyone seems to have gone back to their usual antics. He sighs, taking them back to their village, where he recalls all of his memories after first arriving in this new world. As everyone starts crying from nostalgia, Yukito watches them argue and play around. He walks away from the spot, feeling like this terrible world was also the best for him. Meanwhile, from a secret spot, Loki watches everything, coldly planning her moves for the future. And this cliffhanger is where our dark and exciting show ends. Please like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel for more quality content.